Hi, I'm Peter, Circuit3.
And I'm Peter from ATOMZERO and VATSWAV.
This is episode 2 of the AnalogueTrash Artist on Artist podcast. Tell me, Peter, when was the first time you recorded a piece of music? And what were you using when you did it?
Okay, well, this takes me back to high school when my parents decided to surprise me with a keyboard. And when I came home, I was disappointed. It was like a Yamaha keyboard with just preset sounds. And so I asked very politely if there's a way I could go and exchange it for something else. And it was an Casio keyboard, which is, now I look at it back and it's kind of hysterical because just Casio doesn't really have the best reputation to some extent. And you could create and generate your own sounds. And I suppose that would be the very first sort of instance of me recording something. As far as recording something that's actually being, shared around beyond my immediate family is myself and 3 other individuals. We formed a band called The Immigrants. We were heavily influenced by Depeche Mode. And, we were a quartet. And away we went. We played some gigs, both out here east of Toronto and in Toronto downtown. And we had fun doing it.
That's really cool. What were the instruments you used in The Immigrants' first lineup?
Right. So this was back in the 90s, and I had the EPS 16 Plus sampler.
The Onsonic, is it?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we also had the Roland W30 sampler, I think.
I had one of those.
Yeah. And, it had a screen and the Onsonic EPS 16 Plus had an onboard sequencer. The timing wasn't the best, but my friend used an Atari 1040 SD. I can't remember the name of it. It's a very old one.
It was probably like T-Tracks or something like that. There was a couple of go-tos. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Commodore was great for that.
Yeah, now this is pre-Atari Falcon days, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he was a musical virtuoso, and he's kind of gone on to be very successful artist. He does music for video games, etc. He's got an agent in LA, and he's done a soundtrack for DVDs. Quite very, very, very talented. And he, to this day, I'm friends with him, and he has been an integral sound to VATSWAV, my side project, as he does the mastering for it.
Oh, cool. I think that the first time I recorded something was on I think it was Christmas 1978. Santa gave me a small little mono cassette recorder. You remember the small rectangular ones that, for some reason, it seemed that every kid on our street got one that Christmas, and they were all the same brand. I just have a sneaking suspicion a few might have fallen off the back of a truck in our neighbourhood.
It wasn't a realistic, was it, from Radio Shack?
No, I wish. Oh, that would have been an upgrade.
Okay.
So with this one, I was gifted it with a Boomtown Rats album, which was kind of cool. And of course, the first thing I did was go and get a blank cassette, and I had a guitar. I didn't have any keyboards. I would have been pre-teens, and so I used that, and bless them, my family had to put up with an awful lot. But the first time I recorded with a synth was over in my school pal's house. Paul was his name. He left school before me and immediately went out and on hire purchase bought a CR78 drum machine and a Moog Rogue synth, a Casio keyboard of sort of unknown ability. And he bought a 4-track, a Porta Studio 144. He's probably still paying off the hire purchase on that to this day. So I would bring along a really iffy 12-string guitar and a terrible Fender Strat knockoff. Buying a keyboard was just, it wasn't going to happen until I left school. And then just before I started university, I had to work a night shift to save so I could afford to go to university, and got halfway through that year of working and realised, I could buy one of those new Roland Juno 106s. And I calculated in my head I could do that, and I could still save enough, like if I did no socialising, between that date and when I needed to start in university. And it worked out. I got it. And it actually got me paying gigs. And that was some of the first stuff we did. And we were bouncing sort of tracks on a 4-track
Nice.
I found the tapes, and they are every bit as terrible as you imagine them to be.
Yeah. Well, technology has come a long way too, right? And the listener's
Yeah.
expectation, I find too. Like, if you go back to early 90s and listen to some of the industrial music made back then, the focus really wasn't on vocals that much.
No.
And if you listen to it now, it's really, gone a long way. People have gotten better.
Yeah, there's a political term, and I'm sure all of the political scientists out there will scream at me, you've got it wrong. It's something about, the means of production being in the hands of the proletariat, which is probably a good lyric and is probably completely misquoted. But I love the idea of it. The means of production is in our hands, which is really cool. I did volunteer a question on an online chat with Don Letts, BBC Six Music presenter. And I said, isn't it wonderful that we have access to all of this technology now, and even like somebody who doesn't have a lot of cash can get an old piece of equipment and still make amazing music and still create it. And his response was, well, yes, however, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I have heard that before, for sure.
Which I think illustrates part of the other problem. The flood of well-meaning but not very good content is a bit of a problem too.
True, but I'm not sure if I subscribe to that. I mean, I think you could, explore your creativity. Is it worth releasing it out to the masses? That would be the question, right?
Yeah. What's your filter?
Yeah, and these days it's incredible. If you have a computer, there's so many free VSTs, plugins to kind of help you along with that. It has come a long way. Peter, when you were talking about how you started out with your first recording, and that's what I face too, is like just to have the ability to do that would be a financial strain. It would take a lot of dedication. I did it at a time when I was in high school, and just out of high school, everybody was socializing, and we would be sticking back in our home studios trying to record the next track or write it or whatever. So it's definitely a different world. And now here we are, I guess, 35 years later, and people are putting in text prompts and making music, which sounds horrible, but... Yeah,
so you mentioned there, I guess, for the non-musicians, so if you're using an AI type service in a text box, you type a prompt. So it would be along the lines of, make a song that sounds a bit like Depeche Mode. And somebody did that.
Yeah.
And you probably saw it shared and probably heard it.
I've heard it, yeah.
And I heard it, and for me, when I listened to it, I thought, well, it's interesting, but it was only interesting because I was thinking about the technology that created it, if create is the right word, sort of the technology that output it. It output something. It didn't create it, it just output something. And then an hour later, I thought to myself, how did that song go again? And I realized it was shit. I couldn't remember the melody line, the words. It was kind of like a knockoff pair of Levi's, Vellies. And after a few minutes, there's a hole in the pocket. And then when you bend over, they rip. And then the blue isn't quite the right sort of blue. And overall, it just leaves a very bland taste in your mouth.
It's an empty experience.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's not satisfying at all.
Lifeless.
Yeah.
Peter, what sort of, do you have any influential artists, whether it is someone that's influenced you for years or whether someone you say, I want to write a certain song that kind of captures this particular mood and maybe this artist kind of has captured it. Let me sort of soak up that energy before I sit down in front of a keyboard and write something.
Yeah, my struggle with influences is that I can't hear them influencing me. And I really want them to because I love what they do. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. But so as a kid, I just grew up with classic pop. So it was the 70s. So you have younger listeners will have to understand that the pool of music that you could get access to was... We would get the BBC radio feed coming in through Ireland. We were close enough. So on a Sunday evening, we would listen to the chart rundown, which at the time when I turned about sort of 11, 12, it was perfect. I was getting tuned into the new wave of stuff. Certainly no punk was getting played, not on the BBC. We would hear it on local pirate stations. And that's when I just got hooked. I would get up early for school so I could listen to pirate radio. How sad was that? That's where you would hear the indie releases, and that's where I heard about Stiff Records and stuff. So there was that. But I was playing guitar and learning how to play Beatles songs because that's what everybody did, everybody in my orbit. But when I got into secondary school or high school, as you say, in Canada, the explosion of electronic pop came through. And I was really lucky. My buddy Paul, one of his mom's boyfriends, must have worked in a record store, and he had access to a whole bunch of stuff that was just not attainable for me. So he had the first couple of Human League albums, which melted my brain. And then all the Mute Records stuff. Like, he had Dreaming of Me before anybody had heard about Depeche Mode.
Incredible.
And Cabaret Voltaire and stuff. So for hardcore, if it was to make a list of influences, is classic songwriters like sort of Jimmy Webb, McCartney, Lennon, Harrison, not Ringo, and maybe power pop and really intelligent writers like Andy Partridge from XTC, who I got to know in a future life. But from an electronic music point of view, I'm a huge Vince Clarke fanboy, to the point of it's embarrassing. He is definitely an influence because I've watched how he uses his equipment in a really smart way. Very minimal, and yet it just sounds so amazing. Like the Upstairs at Eric's album.
Yeah.
It's an MC4, 4 tracks of mono sequencers, an 808 drum machine, a Linn drum, a Pro 1, and I think he had a Cobalt, like real pretty basic stuff. It wasn't until the second album that he had a Fairlight. So I think they would be it. But more current stuff, I keep falling down rabbit holes. I went through this insane Boy Harsher phase, dreaming I could make stuff as visceral as that. And I've tried, and it doesn't sound like them. But maybe it's opened my eyes to the possibilities of what it can do.
Sure.
And then I've started listening to funk and disco. Yeah. And I can't dance. And that's what I'm on. How about you? It's like, who did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, Depeche Mode was a huge influence on us. I mean, it started with sort of listening to their album, and with this keyboard that I was gifted, I would just try to play by ear and replicate the melodies. And how did they do that? How did they do this? Yeah. And it just kind of continued from there. I think to this day, it kind of has influenced the way I might structure my melodies or whatever. But that was sort of the genesis of it. Then I went into, so at this time, I lived in Western Canada, in Calgary, and there was a record store there called The Attic. And they would source and play obscure music. And I remember walking in, seeing an album cover that really spoke to me because it just had symbols that I related to from my youth when I grew up in Poland. And that album was That Total Age by Nitzareb. And I asked him to play it. And the first song I heard, I'm like, I'm buying this. This just blew my head off. And so that was sort of my transition from more synth pop stuff to harder electronics, just kind of a more punk aesthetic and energy. And really, when I kind of think about that, that's what's always influenced ATOMZERO for me is just having music with energy. Whereas VATSWAV, it's the exact opposite. The tools are changed, they're different, and the ideas are different. But so that has different influences on me that I would probably say it's spawned from like the pandemic and just a different work life and just sort of music that just sort of chills my brain out, and I can just play something in the background while I'm, working or doing something else. And, there's a lot that goes onto that, and trying to sort of, when I'm sure when you're trying to write, you're trying to make your own voice in music, trying to, even though we're influenced by artists, you're also trying to put your own stamp on things, and how, and that process could be from how you record it, how you write the song, what's, the instrumentation involved, and the voices and the singing, I think that's what sets you apart. When I listen to your album, Technology for the Youth, the background vocals and, that relationship with you and the harmonies there, I think that really sets you apart. And strangely enough, it made me think of a band that I remember from Sweden back in the 90s called Daily Planet. And I thought, that really reminds me of this album.
Oh, I know the Daily Planet.
Yeah. So I immediately, I still have CDs, and I went and I sourced the album, and I'm like, Peter doesn't sound anything like Daily Planet, yet somehow my brain made that connection. Maybe it's just, how memory plays tricks on you, when you're remembering something, but you haven't listened to it in years. But I think it's something about the vocal arrangement, but that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. So Johan Bäckström is one half of Daily Planet. I adore his music, and we're both very influenced by Vince Clarke.
There we go.
That's possibly it. And thank you. So what you said there is very complimentary and intentional. I strive to make the listening experience interesting so that it bears repeating, so that maybe on the second listen you'll suddenly pick up on something. And then the next time you listen you'll think, oh, I didn't hear that because that sort of stuff, I love that when you're going back to an album. So yeah, Daily Planet, I'll take that. Thank you.
But I have to be clear, you sound nothing like them, yet somehow my brain made that connection.
Yeah, I think possibly because of the writing process maybe is quite similar. I can't speak. Johan's solo stuff is wonderful, and of course he's now a member of White Door, and he produced that album. And I got to meet Johan. We played on the same bill in a show in London back in 2019. So it's interesting that you hear the references there, and I know we're going to play some of each other's music here, and I did find it difficult to pick stuff from your back catalogue simply because I was spoiled for choice, and I think what I did was I sort of narrowed it down to what gave me the most immediate response, because you go with your gut sometimes. And, one of the tracks, definitely I could pick up on the Depeche influence, but for me it was less about the melody, although now reflecting on it I can hear some of the Alan Wilder-like approaches to melody and arrangement. But for me some of it was the sounds, which I would love to be able to make, I describe them as metal bubbles, which means nothing. But, I wish it was synesthetic where I could associate colours.
Right. And
when I'm listening to some of your stuff, it's very metallic, bright, shiny metallic, and then suddenly you just get this big slab of cold steel just coming in, and you can see the sparks flying. And there's times I wish I could make music that gave that impression, but that's why there's room for everybody, because I can't do, or at least I don't think I can do that very well. I could probably do a poor imitation of it, but that really struck me actually. And now that you've mentioned the Depeche thing, that's such an obvious.
Well, thank you for your kind words. So my first choice for Circuit 3 track is Overview Effect. I'm a sucker for space sounds and melancholy, and this track features both on top of some classic analog sounds.
my first choice, and it wasn't easy, it's Device from the Technophilia album. Lyrically and sonically, it really sort of got my interest. It's got metal bubble synth going on. Lots of room, it sounds big. And I love the line you've got in it. Life, is it life if I see it through digital eyes? It's brilliant.
ATOMZERO was also influenced by club culture and, music that you would kind of hear in clubs. And sadly, these things have been sort of dying around the world. And VATSWAV is sort of my musical output for that. Saying that, I'll go see a gig, and that will really kind of reignite certain passions in me to sort of go back to ATOMZERO and make music like that again. And certainly me and Andrew have been talking about it and meaning to write again together, which I'm excited for. And then life has other plans for you and my...
Yeah, I know. Like, I had plans last weekend to do a remix because it's been on my plate for a while, and just stuff happens. Like, real life gets in the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been sort of out of the live circuit for a number of reasons. We hope to kind of come back and return and play live because we miss it.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's change track here. Let's go to maybe some of the technical stuff there, Peter. I mean,
oh yes, let's do that.
Because if anything will set the listeners on fire, it's the following conversation.
Oh, you know what? They're calling their friends now. And they're sharing the link to this podcast online saying, you won't believe what they're talking about. You've got to hear this. There's nothing gets people more excited than music nerds talking about which flavor of filter they prefer. Tell me, what's the most recent bit of equipment that you've got which has sparked your imagination or just given you a warm feeling inside?
Sort of when I started working on ATOMZERO with Andrew kind of introduced me to Eurorack modular, which I feel like Eurorack has a bit of a bum deal even among electronic musicians because you're spending a lot of money on it, I suppose, when you kind of add it up. I see it kind of more like fractional costs, but hey, I get it. Not everybody's privileged to keep on buying stuff just to build a synthesizer. Why would I go with a Eurorack modular? Because I kind of got tired of sort of fixed architecture, and this kind of lets me patch sounds, and the signal can go wherever my imagination takes place. So when you're asking me what sort of gear have I recently bought, I've recently got into granular synthesis, and I purchased an Instro R-Power, and I may be mispronouncing the name. And so what granular synthesis does is you feed in a signal. The signal is made up of grains, and you can make the grains smaller or larger, and you can loop them. And honestly, it's a beautiful interface for this particular granular synthesizer, and I've only touched the surface. So I fed it a baseline, and what came out was nothing like what came in. And I love that. Mm-hmm. The fact that it could just do something like so wild. And I hope to incorporate them to future VATSWAV ambient tracks.
I've been avoiding modular, and for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know what the hell modular is, if you can imagine a classic synthesizer they're originally made up of little modules, and each module had one job. So one of them would be an oscillator and would just make a wave sound, like a sine wave, like ooh, like that. And then you get another module that would filter that sound. So it would do something like remove all of the high frequencies or remove all the low frequencies. So it shapes the sound. And then after that, it would traditionally go into a little amplifier so that you could decide, is the sound going to start like if you could imagine it being visualized, that it starts really quiet and goes, ooh, gets loud.
For sure. If you're making like a string sound, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You want a long sort of attack. Yeah,
or if you want a brass sound where you want a nice sharp attack on it. So you would buy different modules. And then companies like Moog started to make, okay, here's a pre-configured box for you that has each of those modules in a box. And I guess that was a sea change. And it's really funny because now so many artists have gone back to the modular stuff for various reasons. I think a lot of it is the absolute control it gives you over what you want to do, and then the opportunities it gives you to mix and match stuff that manufacturers are never going to mix and match for you. And I've avoided getting into it because I've seen what happens. People go crazy with that stuff.
It does, yeah. So what you spoke about there is like the typical architecture of a synthesizer would, like, the signal path would be from a VCO to a VCF to a VCA. So voltage controlled oscillator, which generates the sound in any number of waves, to a voltage controlled filter, which is sort of take out the high and low end, and then an amplifier or an attenuator. What modular enables you to do is play around with that path, and you can do a lot of different things in it. So it just kind of opens up the world. And ATOMZERO is sort of kind of a mix between hardware synths and some VSTs. And I kind of found myself getting really bored with VSTs and plugins. And, listen, if there's any listeners out there using it, they're amazing. I'm not knocking it. Was just my interaction with it. I just felt like I needed something different, something more. And Modular was it. I invested in System 500, but from Roland, which is a collaboration between Roland and Maleko. Maleko was started out by Paul Barker from Ministry and Josh Hawley. I'm not sure what his past is, but I recently saw him playing with Paul Barker as Lead Into Gold. And that kind of opened up my world and, what's possible. And just hearing those very raw analog sounds, I was like, I'm in. Here I am years later and really enjoying that process of music making, which really is what hooks me in to continue making music. That process has to be fun for me. It has to be tactile. It has to sort of exceed my imagination. And for me, it worked, but I get it. It's not for everybody.
What I've gotten into recently, I have gotten rid of a lot of equipment. That was just me dealing with my gear fetish, because growing up I just couldn't afford them. So then I wanted to get them, try them, and then realize, actually I don't really want it. So I've become much more selective now. And so I've got traditional polysynths, monosynths. For people who don't know the difference, polysynth, you can play more than one note at a time. Monosynth, you can play just one note at a time.
But Peter, you're saying there's a reason you didn't get into Eurorack modular, but right over your shoulder, you've gone semi-modular.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to hide that image right there. So I should explain for listeners. There is a little rack here, and it's sort of modular, coming in quietly through the back door, and sneaking up me. So it's 3 Moog boxes, and they are, I'm going to say, they're semi-modular.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, it's like saying, yes, of course I smoked weed, but I didn't inhale. Well, I'm inhaling right here.
Yeah.
And it's got a little patch bay, and what it's actually getting me to do is explore a bit more, go off the rails and colour outside the lines.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I can see how I feel like the Pusherman has given me one for free right now, but I'm really going to stop because I've nowhere to put them anyway. So that's a good reason not to do it. What I started doing on social media is when I get something interesting to me happening, I'll just stream a little bit of it just to let people know, yes, he's still alive and he's still making sounds. But I've started to get into video synthesis.
Yes.
But I don't really know what I'm doing, which is probably a good thing. And I've bought one device, the Sleepy Circuits Hypno.
I nearly bought that.
I think you'd love it. What it is, and this is going to crack some of the nerds up, it's actually a Raspberry Pi, which is a small little computer in a box, and they've created their own little interface on it. And it's basically 2 streams of video, and you apply some of the standards you would do with audio around shaping the sound, and it applies it to the video. Now, I'm sure there's better video terminology for it, but I'm applying what I understand from audio synthesis to it. But it also lets you connect video input to it, and it's got a HDMI output, so you can project it. It can be reactive to the music.
Exactly.
So as I'm running a bass synth, it can be triggered by that. And also, if I can connect cameras to it, all sorts of fun things can happen in venues. And I think that's as far as I'll get into video synthesis. It'll do enough for me.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I nearly bought that as well. And it was the same idea. I don't want to be spending hours and hours preparing video backdrops and then kind of being stuck to that and synchronized too much. Eurorack modular, there's a lot of improvisation in it. And so I just thought if I could extend that to video, it would be incredible. There are other tools that I'm kind of looking into as well to do that, because eventually I do hope to actually start playing live with modular stuff. There's a lot of challenges that go along with that. And, I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of that, but that's kind of, my long-term plan.
It is hard with when the equipment is not so linear, and maybe I should explain what I mean by that. So my live shows up to now have been very linear. I've come from a pop tradition of song structure, and although I have as a musician improvised live, not in an electronic context, I want to make the shows more interesting. And some may say, well, Peter, the videos are really interesting to look at. I said, yeah, but I can't just go off on a tangent with something and I'm finding that limiting. So my live shows, for anybody who may have seen them, may have seen the live streams, or may have actually seen me in a venue, because I've done some shows with AnalogueTrash over in the UK, and I will project video, because who wants to look at this? And for the listeners, I'm pointing at my shiny bald head. Who wants to look at this on stage? Even Thomas Dolby has gotten out and has gotten his hair fixed. So nobody needs to see this. And it's not interesting. And I really believe in immersing people in what they're experiencing. I want them to see stuff and hear stuff. And it's linear, and it served its purpose for me, but now I want to move on to something which is a little bit more dangerous and reactive and
for sure
flying by the seat of my pants. But the point I'm eventually getting around to is, what are your thoughts on artists who are using the equipment live and truly improvising? I see a line between two groups there. I see one line where it is either incredibly self-indulgent or just unaware that there is an audience, and then the other side who is thoroughly enjoying it but is making it a shared experience where it's interesting.
Yeah, no, and that's a very dangerous path to tread, the self-indulgence, because I'm not going to lie, you doing modular stuff, sometimes you can just run off a sequence, it becomes hypnotic, and it's great for you, whereas everybody else is standing around waiting like, hey, could really use a change now. I'm done with that.
Or they've gone home.
So I suppose it kind of depends on what kind of music you're making, right? I think while VATSWAV is sort of an ambient project, I think live, it wouldn't necessarily work like that. That live sets would have to have a little, have to be more upbeat. And that was sort of why I've entered a slightly more upbeat territory with my appearances on the AnalogueTrash compilations, Rotoscoped Dreams and 33.33, just to kind of give it a different sort of flavor of VATSWAV. Mm-hmm. You have to be very careful not to bore your audience, and something that you might find extremely appealing to your ears. Most of the general population will not care whether you're digital, whether you're analog, whether, it's just like, at the end of the day, is the vibe there?
Yeah.
That's where it lands, for me at least. You speak about sort of the live improvisation, whether it's with video, backdrop, or, musically. Again, some people might not care about that. For them, that might be the first time they're hearing your songs live, mm-hmm. and hearing it sort of as a shared experience in a live venue and much louder than they can sort of do it at their home. That's the experience in itself. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you should be carried away with potentially too much improvisation. I think structure is good. And I know when I initially reached out to Adi, our sort of label head, co-head, I said, hey, I'm getting into your modular, and I think I can kind of, behind his eyes, his brain kind of slowed down, because the sequencers that are, involved with sort of the modular stuff, they don't have song structure, right? So they're sort of like these endless sequences, and well, great. You can only listen to them for about a minute before, hey, what's happening next, right? So I try to kind of include song structure with sort of my modular pieces, and hopefully I've accomplished that. And the challenge is how to kind of translate that for live. I think Circuit3 is very song oriented, and I don't know how when you write these songs, do you have do you leave yourself room for improvisation? For example, a middle eighth that could stretch for longer, where you can play longer. I mean, I'm not sure if you're relying on any backing stuff or if the sequences are running live. What's sort of your approach to that?
So there's a few parameters you have to work it in when you're doing a live show. Even if you're the headliner, you have to know what time you're going to begin and what time you're going to end. And if you're not paying attention to that, you'll find yourself, you've played one song. and then the sound guys waving at you.
Or if you play over and you really piss off the promoter and you're never invited back. So
you're never invited back. There is that. So to try and answer your question, I see playing live and writing and arranging and recording as all distinct activities. So I write something and my immediate thoughts on it are, okay, is this something that is going to be an interesting song for somebody to listen to? Now, how can I make it really interesting from a sound point of view and an arrangement point of view? I go through all of that, and I lean heavily on what I know, which is classic song structure, and I sometimes do try to push out. And then when I'm doing it, it's in the back of my mind, what will I do with this if I get to do it live? And I've actually stopped worrying about that because I used to obsess a little bit about how will I do this live. And I've started to say to myself, I'll solve for that later. But let's take a track off my second album, The Price of Nothing and the Value of Everything. There's a track called The Rain. And that track live...
That's the track that I chose.
Oh, brilliant. Great. Excellent choice. And it's interesting, I got requests for that on the last tour. And somebody drove a long way to hear me play it live. So what I will do is I'll know with that song that I'll know the motifs and I'll know the pieces to play. So what I will have is I will have live instruments that I will play and I'll do live vocals and I will have stripped down backing from the multi-track so that it's familiar and also it keeps me in time. But then there will be entire sections that I can improvise over.
That's great.
And that I enjoy. So that bit of that show off part of me can, do a solo. I have used a guitar live because inside here is a wannabe Jimmy Page. And no, don't worry, as your 80s going, oh crap, he's going to try and do a Led Zeppelin. No, I'm not. But that's kind of, I don't know if that answers the question, but the simple answer is yes. But where I'm going now, that is, and this is probably up online for people to see. If you're in the Supporters Club, it's definitely there. We did a label sort of live show for the 10th anniversary of the label, and I did a very short set, and I went out of my comfort zone using Electron equipment. So I've been using their stuff, and it's some of it's sample based. And what it allows me to do is to take little clips of my original tracks. And what I'm trying to do is remix my song live while I'm performing it.
Yeah, no, it's a different approach to live performance, and I think it's great.
Yeah, and it gets me the balance between yes, you can get to hear the song. And then at the same time, you'll get to hear me do something different with it. And I'm not beholden to a linear timeline because I'm locking it to a video. And I started using some video synths with that were reacting to what I was doing. And I'm figuring that out. Yeah. And that's where I want to go with the live shows, where I can do that. Because I think, as you said, the vibe in the room and the experience that people are having. Yeah. You can play with people, something as simple as applying a low-pass filter. Yeah. And they just open up the filter.
Creating a drop and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and people they don't know why they're reacting to it. And that's what I love about it. Yeah. You can see them and you're thinking, oh yeah, they're feeling the tension. And instead of it being pre-programmed, I can play with it. Something as simple as that, I love. Yeah. Or crossfading between songs. Yeah. I love doing that. That's probably a very long-winded answer to a very straightforward question.
No. It's with electronic music, right? So when we did perform as ATOMZERO, it was a different band lineup and we had a live drummer and it really freed us up. It was absolutely awesome. We relied on some backing, but it was definitely such a live feel to the music. It was awesome. All right. And for my second choice, I selected The Rain. The VATSWAV gremlin in me really appreciates the dedication to executing this track. It's very easy in this sort of genre of music just to kind of make songs that tap the foot, and I just love the emotion in this track that you put through, and the dedication. And my understanding is it was based around the spring and having a sort of an apocalyptic view of it, which I thought was an interesting concept.
Oh, cheers, thank you. And it's in the saddest of all keys, D minor. There's one for the music nerds.
No, it's probably why. It's probably why it struck such a chord with me.
I need the rain when
So again, this wasn't easy, but my second choice, it's the lead track off the Technology EP. And I specifically chose the firmware update remix because the irony for somebody running synthesizers and drum machines around firmware updates is not lost on me. But really, the main reason I chose it because it's got a really sexy synth intro. And in the second half of the intro, it goes in a really good way in the Depeche direction. At least I associate those sort of sounds with Depeche. It's a complex sound, and I love how if you've got earphones on and headphones on, you've got this gorgeous ear candy where the rhythmic synths are going across the stereo field, and it's a great example of here's a lead off track, here's a taster. This is what you're getting into. I love it.
Oh, thanks very much. let's switch tracks. I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What, again, going back to the sort of gear talk, what's the most unique or strangest piece of gear that you have?
It's called the Weird Sound Generator.
I love it.
So there's a website called Music from Outer Space. And this appears on some of the tracks on Technology for the Youth. And what it is, I'm actually not sure what it is, because most synthesizers have labels like oscillator, filter cutoff. The labels on this are wacky frequency, zany frequency, level of zaniness, weird frequency, unusual on or off. It's just really weird. The oddness filter. And I picked it up during the pandemic. Somebody was just clearing out stuff, and it was a kit that they'd built. And I still don't know how it works. But you start with it and you just start trying things, and then you say, what would happen if I put just this through a delay? And then maybe a reverb as well. And the next thing you know, you've just got this madness going on.
Yeah.
And it's so that, I think the Weird Sound Generator, every studio should have a weird sound generator.
I love it. I love it.
And a cat.
Unfortunately, I can't have a cat. My wife is allergic.
Oh, no. Oh, no. But how about you? So, what's the most out there for you?
I have two modules. So I'll kind of go into one, and this is kind of a fairly recent discovery. It's by a company called Nonlinear Circuits. And they use sort of circuitry back from the 70s, so it's not really digital. And it's called Cellular Automata, which provides a random LFO source.
Okay.
And it's based on apparently a theory called Conway's Game of Life. And what it does is it looks at the way cells and neighboring cells interact to generate a random pattern. And some get to live on and duplicate. Others die off, and it becomes this like mathematical pyramid. So it's a little bit maddening.
Wow.
So that's one item. And then the next item I have is a weather drone, which is very similar to your WSG there, that things aren't labeled. It's by a French company called EOWave. I've reached out to them asking for, hey, do you have a manual for this? And no, they just ghosted me. Which is in line with that. So you can do it as a kit where you can build it yourself, or I bought the V1.5, which is already pre-built, but I don't know what I'm doing with it. I mean, it's making awesome sounds, and you can put in a volt per octave, you can put in a pitch. So experimentations are are coming with it, and maybe this is a nice segue to talk about what's next for us.
Yeah,
I'm kind of been working on a series of videos and sort of ambient pieces. I'm kind of halfway there, and making some interesting pieces that go along with videos I've been sort of filming around the world. My job kind of requires me to travel, so I kind of will film a scene or whatever, and we'll see how it goes. But musically, I'm trying to limit myself by not using my whole rig, but like limiting myself to a certain set of tools. Getting increasingly more into sort of self-generating patches, just experimenting. How about you, Peter? What's sort of on your horizons?
I don't do myself any favors. I tend to have 4 or 5 things going on at the same time, and I don't know why. I think it's just so much. I've got a universe of possibility here, and I do struggle to stay on one thing long enough, but I end up revisiting it. But maybe that's what keeps it fresh for me. So I think the first thing is I'm doing a new album. Actually, I'm doing more than one new album. I think I've got 2 new albums. So one of them is a very minimal album. It's sort of similar approach to what you've described there. You're allowed to use a drum machine and 2 monosynths. Make a song.
Yeah.
Old school, minimal wave, cold wave, that sort of thing. And I've got 3 or 4 tracks done already. Lyrics from my erstwhile songwriting partner, Brian McCluskey. And actually, that started during the pandemic. I really need to get around to finishing that. I might just keep it as an EP because it may never get finished. Then I've got it couldn't be further away. I've gotten into funk and disco. So there's a track which I shared with the label mates, the way we've been doing listening sessions and stuff, and people can throw in some ideas. And I got some very helpful pointers on it. And I'm learning how to do stuff that people might want to dance to, but it's more based on funk and disco than anything else. And so I've got that going, a couple of tracks in on that. Then I've got, maybe it's ambient, I don't know. It's definitely instrumental, and it's using the little Moog boxes. And then I've got on top of that, I'm reworking the live set. So I'm going to build on what I did for the label anniversary show. I really want to go out and do a mix of old and new stuff in a sort of 40-minute set and live remix it as I'm performing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it takes me so long to get stuff done, because I've just got all of these things going on.
Me too. Like I've Andrew and I, we were talking about just, getting back together and, putting on the next ATOMZERO in whatever, whether it would be a song or an EP or an album or whatever. Just, I think we're just, the baby steps first. And so I started writing something for it, but then life happened, and then, this VATSWAV stuff sort of keeps happening. So I'm sure I'll be revisiting it sooner rather than later, because, I need to kind of send him over my ideas. And then, he's an incredibly talented sort of singer-songwriter. So he then will arrange it and see if it works for him, So I think on both fronts, we're kind of blasting away at making music, but it's just before it sees the light of day, it might take some time.
Why don't we close with a sort of, what's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you at a live show you've played?
So this is years ago, and it was pre-ATOMZERO days, played in a local band called AnalogueTrash. And we sort of like to dabble with some theatrics. Well, we decided to pause the show halfway through. We had a kind of a crappy guitar, and we invited an audience member to come on stage with us and smash this guitar to pieces.
Oh my word. So, how did that go?
It went very well, actually, but it was, looking back, it's just, we were young. We were very young. It was fun, and it definitely got the audience engaged and laughing. Like at first they thought this, we're putting them on or something. But it was at an old venue called Catch-22. I think that was the show. Yeah, it was a fun show.
There's people who were at that show probably still talk about it.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, as far as ATOMZERO, we played, I remember playing just after New Year's, we played a gig. I think the song's called Surface, I can't remember now. And yeah, we had sort of like an intro, and then it kind of kicks into the main song, and the intro, we were all off. It was like just cacophony, whatever. And then there was like part of the song had a drop, and then the beat comes in, whatever. And it was funny because everybody thought it was intentional, because it was all off timing. We were all like behind a beat, and then when the song kind of kicked in, we were all on beat. So it just was sort of a happy accident, I suppose. I don't know.
Wow.
How about you?
I think the second show I did as Circuit3, I was heavily reliant on a laptop, and it blue screened just as I started the first song. So, that wasn't awkward. Luckily, as you can probably tell, if you stick a mic in front of me, while my hands are furiously fixing stuff, I can talk to people. I was in a band. I lived in New York for about 4 or 5 years in the early 90s, and I was in a band that I joined via an advertisement in the Village Voice. And the band had a, air quotes, label deal, and we did the album. I got to use a synclavier back when a synclavier was $250,000, because the guy who owned the studio had had a Billboard dance hit and bought himself a synclavier. And the only other synth he had was a Mini Moog. And that was the other synth that I got to play for the first time. And we did the album, and we did our launch gig for the album. So we played a club somewhere in Midtown Manhattan, and we set up on stage, did a sound check, and while we were off just grabbing pizza or something, they set up the lights or whatever. And we came back in, and we went on to do our first number. And the lead singer kind of had a sort of a Jim Morrison fetish, right down to the leather pants. And they did look like a drag Liza Minnelli. It's about the only way I can describe them. And said he was going to open with one of his poems from his book of rockstar poems, published by Rockstar Press. I later found out how you could self-publish, but let's leave that. And I think the opening line of the poem was, if I can remember correctly, it was something along the lines of, "I have arrived." And he gives that, and the idea would be, it would all come in at the end of the poem on the first opening power chord, ta-da! And just as we hit that power chord, and the drummer, me, the bass player, him and guitars, and the lights all went on, electricity cut out, and all you could hear was ta-da! And then just silence, and the room lights had to come up because the stage lights had failed. We subsequently found out they had power strip attached to a power strip attached to a power strip, running the entire PA, backline and lighting rig, going to a single electrical outlet somewhere in a corner of the club. It was that kind of gig. I just wanted the ground to swallow me up and eat me whole at that point. I left said band shortly afterwards.
That's fair. I'm Peter from ATOMZERO and VATSWAV.
And I've been Peter from Circuit3.
And you've been listening to our Analog Trash Artist on Artist podcast. Thanks for listening.